welcome back to my channel. It has been a very long time. I'm Tian and this is actually the new house that my partner and I just built. And we've been in here for almost a year now. And I know it has been a very long time since I've put a video out, but man, we've been busy. But you are here because you want to know what is the actual cost of building a house in Australia in 2022. And I say 2022 because, I mean, all of the impacts that we've had, that we felt in 2021, like the first home builders grants, COVID, the impacts of that, all of the border closures, how that has resulted in resource shortages and skilled trade shortages. How does that actually impact how much you, as someone interested in building a house, the actual cost that you have to pay in the end? To answer this question of how much it actually costs to build a house in Australia, we need to look at four things. So we're going to look at the location, and we're going to look at how that location choice impacts on the kinds of materials that you need. Then we're going to look at the land size and site constraints, things like site works. Third, we'll look at the house cost, and we'll actually look at the average cost of homes around Australia. And then finally, we'll look at the finishes. Let's just dive right in. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Most people understand that where you decide to live is going to influence the cost that you'll have to pay. If you are purchasing land by the ocean, you are going to pay a whole lot more than land that's in the inner, in the bushland, essentially. Also, if you're in the inner city suburbs, you'll be expecting to pay a lot more than something that is more your inner bushy areas. Things that influence this, I guess, the price of the land, it might not even be something that's by the coast, but it could be in a really good school zone. People pay a lot of money to be in great school zones. I'm in Perth, and some at the top of my head might be like in Brosmoyne. You're also looking at, I guess, Applecross, but other factors are your access to transport, utilities, how close you are to the city. That all influences the cost of the land. And in saying that, depending where you want to purchase your land, you might actually have different conditions placed on the actual house build that we're going to talk about later. So if you are building by the ocean, then that comes with it its own range of, I guess, conditions, coastal conditions. And all that means is that the materials that you use to build your home actually need to be resistant to corrosion, because there's a lot of salt in the air. There's also a lot of wind when you're living close to the water. So the materials being used, they need to be able to survive those conditions. So you can expect to spend a little bit more money on that. Likewise, if you are in a very bushy area, more so like inner suburbs, then you might have a thing called BAL placed on your land. If it's low BAL, that's essentially just bushfire attack level. It means that you probably won't be impacted. You won't need to spend any more money on materials that are fire resistant. But if you've got quite a high BAL rating, part of your budget will then need to go into purchasing materials that are fire resistant. Yeah. So just something to be aware of, because I do know someone that had to spend upwards of $15,000 on top just to ensure that their materials were upgraded to withstand the conditions, because they were both faced with bushland, very dense bushland, and they were also on the coast. So they got the best of both worlds. I mean, it'll be a stunning location, but you need to factor in that cost. Something else to think about when it comes to the location of your land is stamp duty, or transfer duty as it's now called. So what I've included here and what you're looking at is actually from PWC, but essentially it just shows you all the states and the basic threshold, the stamp duty rates and thresholds across Australia. So if we're looking at WA, where I am, the max duty rate that you would spend is about 5.15%. But what you can do is your local government will probably have some sort of stamp duty calculator that you can use to calculate what's the stamp duty that you're going to have to pay on the land. Something else worth noting is there's different concessions offered state by state. So you may actually get some sort of tax relief or rebate when you build your house or sign your building contracts. For example, in WA, you can apply for a refund once you sign building contracts. So that's something that I've done personally, and I ended up getting probably just under $1,000 back. But still, it's money in my pocket instead of someone else's. If you are in WA and you are building a house and you are interested in knowing how to get your hands on that refund form, I have included a link. It's on the WA government website, but it is, if you look up duties form or residential rate, you should be able to find it. Or you can also talk to your settlement agent and they should be able to point you in the right direction. Okay, next we want to talk about land size, but also site constraints. So first of all, land size. I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. The bigger the land, the bigger the cost. The size doesn't always matter. So it's not about the size. Not all the time. I mean, the land that we've built this house on is actually quite small, I would say, compared to the size of the land that some of my friends have built on. This is actually 350 square meters, and not just that, but we were actually impacted by zoning. So this is an R20 zone, which means you can only build on 50% of the land. So that's just a little tip. You're going to want to, before you decide on the land, have a look at what the zoning requirements are, because if you do have a really small lot and you do have really strict zoning conditions, then if you can only build on 50%, yeah, that kind of restricts what you can do. You might be forced to go for a 2-story home, which also means that your costs for building the house will increase. Now let's talk about site works. Site works is a fun one because you might have a land that looks very flat to the naked eye, but even a flat piece of land can incur quite a hefty sum when it comes to site works. The land that we're on here was actually really flat. We spent 20 to 25,000 in site works on what looked like a pretty flat piece of land. So keep that in mind. If your block visibly has a slope, expect to be paying upwards of $20,000. What you also might come across is when the land starts to be prepared to get your slab poured, you might dig up old building materials from the house that was there previously, and it's nothing that you have control over, but you have to pay for it. So we experienced that, and it looked like a very clean, standard, block of land. It looked like it had been cleared quite well, and we still came across those things. So just be prepared to have $20,000 to $30,000 set aside when it comes to site works, and even more than that if you are on a hill or some kind of slope, or you can see that there's like remains of building materials there. Probably not a good sign. This is, I guess, the juicy bit. It's the actual house cost. Now, COVID has played a pretty big impact when it comes to building a house in 2021, and we can probably predict that it's also going to be that way going into 2022. It's safe to say that with border closures, with restrictions, I mean, all sorts have come with that, such as, we've got a shortage of trades, which means that project timelines to complete a build are being blown way out of proportion. How this translates to you as a first-time home builder is essentially that there's rising labour costs due to the shortage of trades and labour. It's also impacted the price of building materials and resources because of those border closures, restricting materials coming into Australia. Prices have gone up for things like timber and bricks, bricks is even something that I'm personally feeling the effect of, not for the house, but essentially I'm looking at landscaping right now, and one, it's been a nightmare trying to secure trades, and two, the cost to build anything with bricks, like a front fence, has just been inflated like crazy. But if you are watching this video, chances are you just want to know, I guess, what the average cost to build a house in your state would be. So if we pull up this handy graph, this is actually sourced from the ABS, and realestate.com.au has actually put together a really nice visual, so we can have a look at what this average is. If you want to access this yourself, I'll pop all the links into the description bar below. But we can see that in the ACT, it's by far the highest average cost at $440,000. And then we're looking at New South Wales sitting at $349,000 on average to build a home. Then followed by the Northern Territory, where I am in Western Australia, it's just under that $300,000 mark. And it's looking like South Australia at the moment is the place to build a house, but really there's not too much in between. So take this as just a guide, depending on what suburb that you are living in. But know that there's going to be so many things that actually influence that cost. If you are buying straight off the plan from a home builder, then you will be able to basically keep your costs quite low. As soon as you start to change plans, or you want something a bit more architectural and unique, your costs will increase. An architecturally designed home, you can probably expect to pay double, sometimes 3 times as much as a house just straight off the plan. Some other considerations is your house double brick? Like I mentioned earlier, brick is quite expensive now. Double brick is very common in Perth. It's not as common in Sydney. I grew up in Sydney, and there's not as many homes there that are actually double brick, especially your 2-story that are both levels double brick. I know that there are some home builders that actually do like a double brick ground floor, and the second floor is timber. So there's some things to actually think about if you want to cut your costs. Okay, the final thing to factor in if you are thinking about building a home and the cost is really your finishes. So this kind of comes into play when you are at the pre-start step of your house building journey. And what it means is it's the fun time. It's when you get to choose all your little finishes. Do you want aircon included? Sometimes it's not included depending on the builder you're going with. Do you want LED downlights, floor to ceiling tiling in your bathrooms? These are all things to consider. I think a good rule of thumb is putting aside maybe, I guess it's depending how unique you want to go and how far you want to stray from the standard inclusions. I don't think I've met anyone yet that has just not spent anything at pre-start. I think on average you could probably, a healthy budget to set aside would be from $5,000 to $15,000. You've made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've learned something, and please look at my other videos if you're building a house, because I feel like they will be of really good value to you. And subscribe so you don't miss any of my other videos. I will be a little bit more consistent. I'm saying a little bit more, not a lot more, because I can't promise you anything. Building a house, as you probably might already know, is a big undertaking, and so is moving into a house and making it a home, which is it's its own journey and a challenge that I've been overcoming. So see you in my next video.